Hey guys, it's Chris Martin here with the Crane Rental Podcast, episode 8, or episode ocho if you're like us here in the Southwest and speak Spanish. We're talking about the right cranes for the job. So this question came in on our Instagram line of what is the right crane for the job? It came from Crane Nation, at Crane Nation on Instagram. You can also follow us on at Crane Service Inc. on Instagram. He DM'd us a question, the Crane Nation guy DM'd us a question, and I'm going to pull up that question. The question is basically this. I was wondering today, why would a company buy a lattice boom crawler crane when they could buy a mobile crane of the same size? Other than that, a crawler crane can travel with a load. Why else would you buy it? Are they significantly cheaper? This is a great question from Matt Crane Nation. Thank you for submitting it to us on a DM. If you guys have a question, you can send it in. info@craneserviceinc.com. That goes to my email. I answer every email that comes in that box. So send your questions, fire them away. We'll answer them here on the show. And we'll make sure we make an episode out of it. Or you can DM us on Twitter, DM us on Instagram, or message us on Facebook. So, it's a great question, but it basically boils down, what's the right crane for the job? I'm going to throw that price factor out of the crane, out of the situation, because price is almost negligible here. You need the right piece of equipment for the job. We also have an article on LinkedIn on Medium of the right equipment for the job, kind of the same topic, but today we're talking about the right crane for the job. So I'm going to take two cranes and talk about them. Basically, our hydraulic crane, our Terex AC250-1. 300-ton all-terrain crane, beautiful crane, very reliable, great crane. I'm going to put that against our Manitowoc 2250, which is a classic crawler, lattice boom crawler crane. I can't say that. A classic lattice boom crawler crane in the game. The 2250 has been around for a long time. Amazing crane, Terex AC250-1, also amazing crane. We're standing today in front of our Marks Crane and Rigging Grove 275-ton. You can see these large AT tires. This is one of the reasons why we love ATs, and we're going to get into that right now. So, an AT crane, I'm going to go over the advantages and disadvantages of an AT crane. Then we'll go back and we'll talk about the advantages of a lattice boom crawler crane, and we'll kind of see where we are at the end of this. This is going to be a shorter episode, guys. I think it's maybe going to be 20-15 minutes here, so won't take too much time out of your day today, but it's going to be a fun one. So, okay, so advantages one of an all-terrain crane. I can deploy an all-terrain crane very easily. I can deploy that asset throughout the Southwest almost at a moment's notice, depending on the crane configuration and counterweight configuration. It may only take 1 or 2 crane loads to get the crane on the job, meaning I only need, 3 to 4 guys to get a crane on the job, and I can do that almost instantly. Almost instantly, meaning I got to get a crane crew here, I got to get everything, do their crane inspection, and boom, they're rolling. So they could be there in a few hours. That's advantage 1. Advantage 2 of an all-terrain crane is these large AT tires. One reason is accessibility. This crane can go up steep grades, loose sand, mud. We're getting a lot of wind here. Good thing we have our wind mic out. So if you hear that, that's just a little bit of wind. We're going to talk about that. That's reason 4 of the AT class cranes. But back to reason 2, accessibility. These cranes can make it up and through some extreme situations. This one has 5 large AT tires. I'm 6'3", and you can see how this tire stacks up. In our Grove RT 9100, the tires are like up to here, 6-foot tires almost. So they can go through a lot of crazy situations. Second part of the AT tire reason that this is great is maneuverability. You can take this all-terrain crane to a site that has, tight constrictions of where you need to place it. And and our TMS, HTC class cranes, your Link Belt HTC series, our Grove TMS series, Maybe you could get it on site into a tight spot. Maybe you can't. Sometimes you're gonna do a 1,000,000-point K-turn just to back and forth to get it there. These AT cranes, you can change the direction of the tires and crab into a spot. You can also change the front tires to go one way, the back tires to go the other way, and you're basically almost pivoting on the center pin of the crane. But with the crab, you can move forward, and man, you can get into really tight places. So maneuverability is sub part of the second. The wind is really cold. Part A would be accessibility and maneuverability. So that's reason 2. Now reason 3 is almost a wash, and here's the reason. Part 3 of advantage of having an all-terrain or a large hydraulic all-terrain crane is the access to long boom. So long boom's great in cities where you need long boom to put an AC unit on a building. I had to cover my hands up here, it's really cold. May have to actually collar up too. This is not necessarily the best wind jacket, but you have long boom, so you can get HVAC units, ACs in a big city. You have long boom for long reaches. That's an advantage for these ATs. You can deploy long boom cranes in little time. Disadvantage, if you take the same radius, let's say we take this in a short boom configuration, 50 feet radius, right? Or 40 foot, whatever. Let's say 40 foot. If I take that in a 40-foot short boom situation, I can hoist a lot. If I take a 40-foot radius and scope out some boom, 190 feet, same radius 40 feet, I'm going to have a decrease in chart mean because mainly I have more boom out. I have more gravity, more forces pulling that boom down, and you can see the visual deflection on these booms when they're scoped out with these long booms. They call it, I don't know, many things. One of them of which is fishing pole effect. When you're fishing and you got that fish and the pole's bending, that's basically what these booms do in large scale. It looks pretty freaky if you don't know what you're looking at. Like, is this thing gonna snap on you? But no, it's not. It's made to deflect, and that's just part of the steel and how it works. So you have tension on the top and compression on the bottom, and that's just how steel rolls. So long boom's an advantage, and a disadvantage, we'll call that basically a wash, The next part of having an all-terrain crane, I would say, is a disadvantage. Now, you have long boom, which is great, but when you have long boom in an AT, you have a lot of surface area that is exposed to the elements, mainly wind. And there's a lot of cross-section that can happen on a large AT crane on the boom with the wind. Now, wind's a dynamic load, meaning wind's constantly changing directions, right? So the load on a boom is dynamically changing, but you have more boom that is exposed, or pardon me, more surface area exposed on a hydro crane boom. It's solid, wind hits it like a banner or a sign or something, and unless you have those little cutouts, right, that lets wind go through, it basically puts all that force on that boom. And that's basically what this AT is. It's just no cutouts, it's all that wind is hitting it, and you get dynamic side loading, you can get dynamic back loading, dynamic front loading. Depending on where the wind's coming from, you're going to get some sort of dynamic loading on the boom, and it could be many different factors all happening at once. Wind direction and wind speed changes. Also, your manufacturer in your manual is going to say, hey, you can only work in so many meters per second of wind, or so many miles per hour in wind. So that's the AT side of things. In the crawler crane side, it's basically the opposite. It's basically a flip-flop of the AT crane. Here's why. A Manitowoc 2250 is not easily deployable, right? I have a truckload for the carrier, I have a truckload for the house, I have a truckload for the counterweights, I have a truckload for the boom. That's 4 right there. Now, if I have long boom, series 3 counterweight, and maxer, I could be 16, 20 truckloads, right? So that's not easy to move. I need 20 plus guys. I need DOT permits for our loads. I can only travel within allowable DOT hours. I can't travel at night, perhaps. You can't necessarily travel AT at night either, but my point is you're going to have trucking issues to get 16 truckloads on a Manitowoc 2250 on site, you could be $50,000, $100,000. This thing 4 hours away with Max is not going to be that. It's going to be much cheaper. So the crawler crane's harder to get to a site. You have more people, more cogs moving in the machine, very hard to get to a site at a split second. Whereas all-terrain crane, very easy to get a crane on site in a split second. So they're basically flip-flop, and you'll see this in many of the other examples. Now, part two of the crawler crane is the more boom you have, it does decrease the chart, but not in such a way that the all-terrain crane does. You can take a Manitowoc 2250 and work on an 80-meter tower. When I say tower, I mean a wind turbine tower, right? In probably Series 3 counterweight. Bob Strohacker is probably going to have to correct that. I'm not sure, but Series 3 counterweight, right? And you can work on an 80-meter tower and pull a rotor down. These are 100 plus thousand pieces. Now, you can't take an AC250-1 and pull a rotor down, which is the same class crane. It's a 300-ton class crane, right? So why can't you? Well, because you have boom restrictions, the chart's not there, it's just not the same. So in the wind turbine thing, having the right crane would be the crawler crane. So boom is heavier in an all-terrain crane, lighter in a crawler crane, right? Now, the other thing that to factor in is wind deflection. We talked about that on the all-terrain side. Now, to carry that same example over into our crawler crane, it's basically like having that banner. It's really cold out here, so if I'm hunkering down or getting all bundled up, it's just because it's really freezing. The lattice boom crawler crane is basically lattice materials in a rectangle, rectangle shape boom with lattice pieces going all around on the side and the inside to create the structure pieces. The lattice boom crawler crane can allow for higher wind speeds, and I kind of half say that because, it depends on the manufacturer, of course, but where I'm saying that is wind can cut through that boom and it's very accessible. You don't have so much dynamic side loading or dynamic loading of the boom due to wind. You have some, of course, because wind is exposed to the boom, but not as much as this sail or this big banner, we have with the AT. So the wind is not necessarily an issue with a crawler. Obviously, it is an issue because, there are limits to a crawler crane with wind speeds and booming it up and booming it down and working. But when you compare it to an AT, it's almost like night and day. So those are basically the advantages and disadvantages of each crane. We have the large tires, maneuverability, accessibility. Now, having the right crane for the job is a big deal because I wouldn't want to take a crawler crane up the side of a mountain when I can just take this, all-terrain crane and do that job. Can the crawler do it? Sure. But do I want to take 10 plus truckloads and incur a $60,000 trucking bill to our customer in and out? No. I want to take this highly deployable asset here and take that to do the job and not have to worry about that. I want to keep that crawler crane on long-term jobs where he can sit on one spot or move maybe only a few times, because it's going to take so many people to knock boom in place. You're actually building the crane. Now, in a crawler crane, it could take our crews maybe 8 hours to build in some cases, and this crane would take, it wouldn't take that long. It would take maybe a few hours, 1 hour to 2 hours, maybe even less on a really good day, or shorter boom configurations or less counterweight etc. But in our larger cranes, like our GMK, our Grove GMK 7550, which we've talked about in many of these episodes, a 550-ton all-terrain crane, basically our biggest crane in our fleet. I wouldn't say the strongest, but I would say the biggest by far of sheer tonnage capacity. But in certain situations can take 8 or 2 days to build. You know, if you're putting an all luffer, mega wing, max counterweight, you know, he needs another crane to help build himself. Also, the crawler crane needs another crane to build himself too. So you're going to need another RT or boom truck dedicated to that crawler crane to stack boom as you lay it out. So that's another disadvantage if you're doing a short-term job. Or could be an advantage because that crawler is the only crane that can do that job because it's so strong. That 2250 with Maxer makes that thing a beast. In some cases, it is almost as strong as our Manitowoc 16,000, which is a 440-ton crane. So that's another topic, another subject. That'd be like putting our 550 up against the 2250 in Maxer. I mean, it makes it that type of crane. But to keep everything simple and keep everything fair, those are the basic reasons of why you'd have one versus the other. I'm going to run down those briefly just in case you forgot. Type of job site, long-term versus short. Short-term, I'd deploy this asset and have him leave in the morning and be back by you know, dinner time, you know. Crawler crane, I can't deploy the crawler crane on site and back out in one day perhaps. I mean, you could depending on boom configurations and how fast and how far away he is, but generally speaking, I'm not going to do that. It's going to be too costly for me and the customer unless the customer has a highly specific job that needs to get done and the crawler crane can only one one can do it and has to be in and out in a day. I'm talking about crazy situations that sometimes don't happen. I'd rather deploy this or Grove GMK 6400 or Grove GMK 7550, get in and out and get done. I don't want to move, you know, 14 truckloads or 10 truckloads in and out on a site in one day. So, highly maneuverable, highly deployable. So, type of job is what I'm saying. If it's a long-term crawler, perhaps. If it's a short job, perhaps an AT. Type of job site. So, if you're going in the mountains, small roads, you may want to take an AT if it's possible because a crawler is wider. You may not be able to get that big truck up there. That could be an issue. What else? Okay, so if it's highly windy like it is today and I'm freezing over here, freezing butt cold and my ears are probably link belt red, you know, I maybe want to use a crawler or some type of lattice boom crane. You know, we have a lattice boom hydraulic truck crane from Link Belt, HC248H. Don't quote me on that. Some of these numbers get tossed and turned around in the head. But it's a lattice boom Link Belt with a truck mount body. So maybe you want to move him, and he's great for bridges and that kind of stuff for windy areas. But if wind's an issue, we're going to have problems. You'd have standby time with this guy because his boom may not be able to handle the wind speeds. You know, that all depends on the manufacturer's charts, of course. But generally speaking, that could be, you know, 15 to 20 meters a second. And I don't know what that is, miles per hour. Mainly we deal with meters per second for wind. So if wind is an issue like it is today, I may not want to be using this asset, or I may not be able to use this asset. If wind was a big issue, I may want to deploy a crawler crane so I can be working long-term projects. Long reaches almost goes 50-50. Now, when I say that because these ATs are capable of long reaches, 440 tip height in our Grove GMK 7550. We have very long boom configurations on our crawler crane. Like I said before, it just depends on the project. If you're in downtown, maybe you want to move in this asset versus a crawler crane that takes a lot of people and a lot of finagling and a lot of other assets and cogs to get moving, because it's maybe just a 2-day job on a weekend. Or maybe it's a 2-day job, but you need the crawler and you have to move it in, and so you have other issues there. So boom length is kind of null, back and forth. So that was a great question from @CraneNation on Instagram. We kind of went over that briefly. We threw price aside. Price is not an issue in this conversation because it really is deeper than price. These equipment cost a lot of money, but I'm not going to pick, we're not going to pick an AT versus a crawler crane just because, $100,000 or $10,000 or whatever the price and difference of buying one of these are. You're going to buy it for the project, the types of projects, what you're doing with it, right? I'm not going to buy an RT because it's cheaper than, an HTC 86100. It's a different class crane. It's made for different things. That's basically what this boils down to. A crawler crane is a very specific crane, and a all-terrain is a very specific crane. It just can't, they can't flip-flop. There's probably a medium where they cross, and it's like, okay, do I pick this one or not? But that's a very small thing, and it may not even cross because job duration, job length, it wouldn't probably cross as 275 that I'm sitting here with. And if I take our example, like our Terex AC300, our Terex AC250-1 300-ton class crane, and I put up against our Manitowoc 2250 lattice boom crawler crane, if you put it on a chart of when I would use one versus the other, those lines probably won't intersect. If I take my Grove GMK 7550 and put it up against the Manitowoc 2250, there's probably a point in time where I'd say, hey, it could be cost advantage, the cost advantage or cost disadvantage would be almost the same to use one versus the other. That's probably where I'd see that happen. I wouldn't see that happen in a 300-ton all-terrain crane versus that 300-ton 2250, I don't think. Maybe it is. But that was a great question from @CraneNation. Guys, if you have a question for the Crane Rental Podcast, my name's Chris Martin, Marketing Coordinator. You can see I'm wearing my Marks gear today, sitting next to the Marks crane. We also have crane service in our fleet and United Crane and Rigging on the East Coast. Send your direct mail to info@craneserviceinc.com. I answer all those questions that come in that email box. You can direct message us on our social media platforms. Facebook, Crane Service Inc. Twitter, Crane Service Inc. Instagram, Crane Service Inc. You see where I'm going with this? You can DM us on any of our social media. I'm the one that answers it. I'll answer those questions. I'll answer your messages. I look at and reply back to all the messages on social. So leave us a message. Send your questions in, and we'll be happy to answer them on our show on the Crane Rental Podcast, guys. Okay, so I'm going to end this episode. This is episode 8, the right crane for the job. Thank you for sending that question in @CraneNation. We look forward to seeing you guys next week with another episode of the Crane Rental Podcast. All right, bye, guys.